In December of 2018, 22-year-old Grace Millane was excited to celebrate her birthday weekend in New Zealand. She was traveling the world after graduating from college just a few months prior. She was having so much fun and constantly updating her family on all the things that she was doing on her trip. That is until her birthday on Sunday, December 2nd. That entire day, no one heard from her. The hostel that she was staying at said that she never returned for the night, and after a few more days of not hearing from Grace, her family just knew that something bad had happened, so they reported her as missing. Investigators got on the case and immediately found a disturbing timeline of events, all caught on video. So, what really happened to Grace that night? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Welcome to today's video. If you guys are new here, welcome. I would love if you guys could hit the subscribe button down below and join the familia. If you're not new here, make sure to check if you're subscribed, because so many of you guys have been telling me like, oh my gosh, I thought I was subscribed for so many years and I just checked it. I'm not actually subscribed. So again, I don't know if it's like YouTube accidentally unsubscribing you or what's going on, but yeah, just make sure to double check that you are subscribed. It honestly does help out this channel so much, and the more that we grow, the more that we can continue to grow our impact and awareness of these cases. Today, we're going to be talking about the case of Grace Millane, a 22-year-old woman from Essex, England, who was on her dream trip around the world when her life was taken from her. Grace's story is devastating and honestly just far too familiar. It reminds me of what happened to Valentina Tres Palacios, of what happened to Laura Lopera, of what happened to Isabela Mesa Sanchez. These were women who were all murdered by men that they trusted. In Grace's case, the CCTV footage ended up being one of the most important pieces in this investigation. The cameras captured nearly every step of her final night, and what they showed helped police learn, the truth about what happened to her and who was responsible. It's definitely going to be a difficult video to get through, and the details in this case are absolutely horrifying, and like I've said before, it's just honestly exhausting to hear this over and over again. To hear this happening so often, how women's lives are just selfishly taken by these men who think they have the right to do this. This is also going to be a long video, but thank you guys so much for being here and for just being so supportive. I also want to give a thank you to the Familia members. I appreciate you guys so much for being a part of our YouTube membership. I love connecting with you guys over, on the member side, and in my last member only video, I went over my favorite fiction thriller books, which was so fun to film for you guys. And if you're not a part of the Familia members, you guys can click below to join us over there for early access to all of my true crime videos and just other BTS content. All memberships contribute to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So yeah, that information will be linked down below, but thank you to all of you guys so much for being here. And with that, let's jump right in and let's talk about what happened to Grace. Grace Emmy Rose Millane was born on December 2nd, 1996 to her parents David and Gillian Millane. She grew up in Wickford, Essex, which is a quiet town in England in the UK, alongside her two older brothers, Michael and Declan. From an early age, Grace was creative. She loved painting, and she even had an Instagram page where she shared all of her work. Her art ranges from paintings of animals like giraffes, elephants, and dogs, to paintings of people or paintings of nature such as flowers or the sky. She just loved expressing herself through her art, and she was outgoing, smart, and full of light. Her family describes her as their sunshine, as always being there for them and just making them laugh or helping them forget about whatever issue was weighing on their minds, even if it was just for a brief moment. Not only was she outgoing, creative, and just full of light, but she was also very studious. She just took her studies extremely seriously, and she eventually earned a degree in advertising and marketing from the University of Lincoln in England. After graduating in September of 2018, like many young people, she was ready to get out there and just explore the world and just live her life. So she decided to take a gap year and travel. She planned to travel for almost an entire year, with the end date being June of 2019, which was perfect timing because she would be home in time for her brother Michael's wedding, which would be that summer. Her gap year officially began the following month after graduation on October 26, 2018. She was leaving from the airport in London for her first destination, which would be Lima, Peru. She spent a few weeks visiting places there, as well as, hopping over to Patagonia and Chile before arriving in New Zealand on November 20th, 2018. Now, New Zealand was supposed to be another chapter in Grace's adventure. It was supposed to be this beautiful place where she could explore and where she planned to spend her 22nd birthday. She first spent time exploring the North Island, such as Cape Reina, and she kind of hopped around to different places, but throughout all of this, she kept in touch with her family constantly. Her dad said that they heard from her basically every single day. She would call them or send them videos and messages with photos and videos and stories about her adventures, and to her family, there really was no indication that anything would go wrong on her trip. She was having fun, she was having the time of her life, and her family was just so happy to see her do something that she loved. On November 30th, Grace moved over to the city of Auckland and checked into the base backpackers hostel, where she shared a 4-bed dorm room with 3 other people. Now, being the outgoing and just social person that she was, she loved meeting new people, whether it was in person or through dating apps such as Tinder. She just wanted to share these adventures with other people who were also down to travel, or, just connect with people from the area and just like meet people. I mean, she was young and single. That night, she met up with a man that she had been messaging on Facebook. They watched a film at his apartment, which was in downtown Auckland, and they spent the night together. The next day, on the evening of Saturday, December 1st, Grace sent her family a photo of a lit up Christmas tree, and again, to them, everything just seemed completely fine. Until the following day, on Sunday, December 2nd. This was her birthday, and her family members, of course, wanted to reach out to her and just wish her a happy birthday, and they were excited to talk to her and hear what her plans were to celebrate. But they never heard back from Grace. They grew concerned when she wasn't responding to any messages or any phone calls on either of the 2 phones that she took with her on her trip. She also wasn't posting on social media or speaking to her friends, so it was all very odd. But trying to stay optimistic, they thought that maybe she was in an area with no cell service, maybe she went on a hike, or perhaps something happened to both her cell phones. I mean, of course, her family was trying to think of all the possible explanations for why she wasn't answering. However, this silence continued for multiple days, and that's when her family just knew that something was extremely wrong. Knowing that Grace would never go that long without communicating with them somehow, they filed an official missing persons report with the New Zealand police on Wednesday, December 5th. The lead detective in Grace's case, Detective Scott Beard, began the investigation at the hostel where she had been staying. After speaking with the staff there, they confirmed that she had not returned to her dorm room on the night of Saturday, December 1st. Now, of course, this did raise red flags. I mean, why didn't she go back to her hostel? But the hostel staff was like, you know what? Like, nothing suspicious has been going on. Yes, her belongings are still in her room and they're untouched, and her bed is, unused. But other than that, like, nothing else has really stood out to us. So detectives were like, okay, well, like, let's look at the CCTV footage in the area just to see if maybe she went on a walk by herself, or maybe we can just spot her going to a different location. And once they started going through the CCTV footage, they quickly uncovered what became critical evidence. They spotted Grace entering another hotel on December 1st, but she was never seen leaving. This was the City Life Hotel on Queen Street, and she was spotted entering at 9:40 p.m. with a man. Investigators, of course, needed to find out who this man was, as he was the last person seen with Grace before she disappeared. Using facial recognition technology and looking at the guest records, they finally had a name: Jesse Shane Kempson. Jesse was a 26-year-old man from New Zealand who at the time was living at one of the serviced apartments at this hotel. So at this hotel, the way it works, around half the rooms are privately owned, meaning some are lived in by the owners themselves, while others are rented out to people, mainly to like young people. Now, before we get into what happened next, let's talk about who Jesse Kempson was. Jesse was born on December 28th, 1991 in Lower Hutt in the Wellington region of New Zealand. When he was very young, his parents split up and his mom moved overseas with his brother, while his dad remarried and basically started a new family. So he was raised mostly by his father and by his grandfather, but that early abandonment by his mother did leave a mark on him. In high school, he was a regional softball player, and after graduating, he worked as a barman and in construction before actually getting kicked out of the family home in 2013 because they were just constantly fighting. His family was upset with him because he was constantly lying and apparently stealing from other family members. So after getting kicked out, he ended up going to Brisbane, Australia, where his mother and his brother lived, but that didn't work out either. They also had problems, and eventually he just moved out on his own to Sydney, Australia. There, he got a job in retail where he met a girl and allegedly ended up having a child with her. However, this is something that some family members, deny while others confirm. So there's kind of a question mark there about whether or not he did actually have a child. After some time in Sydney, Jessie eventually went back to New Zealand and drifted between apartments in Auckland, constantly posting in Facebook groups trying to find new places to stay at. And people who actually lived with him have come forward and they said that they noticed red flags immediately with him. One former flatmate said that he was, chatty at first, but became aggressive over time. He told like these super over the top stories, like claiming he was like this high level oil executive, that he had so much money, that he was connected to gangs or even related to like famous rugby players. Then he would say that he was related to cops, that he was friends with cops. Then at one point he even said that he had cancer or had numerous family members that passed from cancer or currently had it. Like, it's just insane to lie about those things. And the roommate said that if you dared to question any of it, he would get defensive and he would get angry. He needed people to believe that he was someone important or to make people feel sorry for him. He was also part of this like amateur softball league, and his teammates also saw right through him. They actually called him an oddball and said that he would tell everyone like, oh, I have a degree in law, or oh, I'm a businessman, but like no one could ever verify any of it. One teammate said that Jessie was straight up creepy when it came to women, that his whole life revolved around chasing girls and talking to them. It was like this was his obsession. So yeah, his past roommates, people he would go on dates with, and even casual acquaintances all heard these different versions of who he was and honestly didn't like him. Jessie would even tell people that his mother had died. Like, it was lie after lie after lie. At one point, he saw a Facebook post for a roommate wanted ad and decided to respond to it. Now, this ad was posted by a woman and she came forward to speak about her experience with Jessie. She was living in an apartment with two other young women, and once Jessie moved in with them, they almost immediately began having issues with him. He would pay the rent late. He was giving excuses like, oh, I'm waiting for my accountant in Australia to give me money, along with like other random lies, again, despite claiming that he had all this money and was like this high executive. He would also bring home a bunch of random people from his Tinder dates, and of course, this made all the roommates uncomfortable. And when he drank, his mood would instantly flip. He would have angry outbursts and show just aggressive and frightening behavior. This woman remembered one particular night, she got home at 11 p.m. and her roommate texted her being like, please come to my room now. When she walked in, she found her other roommate holding a knife under her blanket. This other roommate said that Jessie had been drinking again and that she felt unsafe with him in the house because when he got home, he just started breaking all their furniture. So the three roommates got together and were talking about how they were going to get him to move out, but they were also scared of telling him to move out because they didn't want him to become angry and possibly harm them. While the three roommates are in a room discussing this, Jessie was in his own bedroom and likely overheard them because he came out of his room with a bag saying that he had to leave because his mother had just died, which again was a lie. One roommate said, quote, the whole thing was awkward. We knew straight away he was full of BS, but we were happy at the thought that he would be gone for a few days. However, the next day, when the roommate got home, she noticed that Jessie had gone back. She could like smell his aftershave, but all of his things were gone, so it seemed like he came back just to pack and basically leave. The roommates ended up changing the locks and just hoped to never see him again. There's also a story from another woman who met him through Tinder that really stood out. She let him crash at her place for a few days after he spun the usual sob story on her, saying that he was struggling and needed a place to stay. He not only shared his struggles with people he met in person, but also online. In one Facebook post made shortly before he met Grace, he said that he was struggling with his mental health and apologized to anyone that he had ever wronged. He also said that he had began taking medication to treat his anxiety. So when he contacted this woman he met through Tinder and gave her yet another sob story, the woman said that she felt sorry for him and tried to help him out, but things got weird. One minute he claimed he was living in a motel paying $1,000 a week. Next, he told her that he was getting kicked out of a flat, so she said that his story just really wasn't adding up. Jessie told her the usual lies, like he was related to a rugby player, that he was about to buy shares of this really nice restaurant with his uncle, he was just telling her all of these crazy lies. And this woman said that Jessie stayed at her place for a few days before suddenly packing up and leaving without an explanation. But not long after this, he called her back asking if he could come back just to borrow a towel. She said yes, but later she found that her stash of emergency cash hidden in those towels had disappeared. She confronted Jessie and of course he denied taking the money. Now, she didn't go to the police back then, but that was it for her. She cut all ties with him and just honestly wanted to move on from it. After this, Jessie moved into a room at the City Life Hotel in in Auckland, where he signed a year-long lease in October of 2018. He told the landlord that his father was on the board for the Woolworth grocery store chain and that now he was the manager for the supermarket chain with a $150,000 yearly salary, and that he even had this like nice company car and things like that. However, it was later revealed that he actually owed the landlord over $5,000 in damages and an unpaid rent. And on top of this, his landlord said that it seemed like picking up women was basically Jesse's full-time job. Like that's all he did. And of course, Jesse was lying about his job. He was not a manager at this grocery store. In reality, he had actually just lost two jobs, one as a barman and the other as a retail sales assistant, and he had actually been collecting benefits. Now, he did have one more job after getting fired from those other two jobs, which was in telephone sales for business training courses. But that didn't last either. His former coworker said that he hit his sales targets by faking invoices and calling his own phone to make it look like he was working. Eventually, the company caught on and Jesse was fired. He lost that job the very same day that he met Grace. Now, I know this was a lot. It was a lot of information. Clearly, this guy was not well, but all of this is important to lead up to Jesse's behavior and just kind of give a backstory as to who this guy was, all the lies that he told, and just kind of what a horrible person he was. Now, all of this brings us back to the investigation. As I mentioned, Grace was seen entering the City Life Hotel where Jesse was living, and detectives saw that he had also commented on her Facebook post the same night that she went missing. He left a public comment on her profile photo that said, "Beautiful, very radiant." All of this evidence meant that something was clearly there. You know, there was some type of connection between Jesse and Grace. So Detective Diana Levinson reached out to Jesse on social media and asked if they could get in touch because they were looking for Grace and they knew that they were connected. The following morning, they got a response. Jesse replied and confirmed that he did meet Grace the night of December 1st, but claimed that he left her at around 10 p.m. and just never saw her again. Later that day, he was contacted again to arrange a formal interview, to which he agreed to, but told police that he would go to the police station and give a full statement after he finished work. However, before he made it to the station, officers actually spotted him trying to go back home to the City Life Hotel. Officers were literally inside the hotel inquiring about him when Jesse was about to walk in, but stopped when he saw them through the glass windows. He turned around and began walking away, trying to hide his face, but the detectives followed him and caught up with him in a nearby shop. They then took him to the Central Police Station in Auckland, where Detective Sergeant Ewan Settle interviewed him officially for the first time. Once at the police station, Jesse is seen sitting in the interview room, and he gets asked by Detective Settle if he recognizes a photo of Grace. Right away, he confirms yes, that he does know who Grace is, and he starts to tell the detective what happened. Jesse says that he met Grace through the dating app Tinder. He said that they matched on Friday, November 30th, and that they started officially talking more the next day. He asked her if she had any plans for the weekend, to which Grace told him that it was actually her birthday that weekend, so Jesse suggested that they go out for drinks to celebrate. They agreed to meet on Saturday, December 1st at this place called Sky City, which is this entertainment complex in the heart of Auckland. The complex has bars, restaurants, and a casino, making it a really popular spot for locals and tourists to, enjoy a night out. They chose to have drinks there at a place called Andy's Burgers and Bar, and when Detective Settle asked, who picked that bar, Jesse said that he was the one that chose it. But then he went on to give this weird explanation. He said that he chose this place because he didn't initially know if Grace was a real person, which prompted Detective Settle to ask him, like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean you didn't know if Grace was real? Jesse then went into this ramble about catfishing, bringing up how people in Australia, people he supposedly knew, had been catfished before, and that he's seen a lot of it on TV. He says that it's a real thing and that it happens all the time now. People go on dating apps and use fake pictures, fake information, pretending to be someone that they're not. Then when they finally meet up in person, it turns out that the person looks nothing like their profile pictures, or worse, it's a completely different person altogether. So he said that in his mind, meeting at Sky City made sense because it's public and it's a busy place, so if Grace turned out to be someone else, he could just walk away. Plus, there would be security there, and that made him feel safe. Yeah. Once Jesse realized that Grace was like a real person, he continued with their date. Jesse says that the date went well, and once it was over, they went their separate ways. He claims that Grace told him she was going to the bar back at her hostel and that she didn't invite him back with her or mention spending more time together. According to him, they just hugged, she kissed him on the cheek, said, "Nice meeting you," and walked off. He says that was the last time that he saw Grace and that this was at around 8:28 p.m. Afterwards, he says that he went to a nearby pub and he stayed there until around 10 or 11 p.m. He claims that he drank around 10 to 11 handles of beer there and then blacked out after, and that the next thing that he remembered was waking up the next morning between 9 and 10 in the morning. Now, he says that he knows it was between 9 and 10 in the morning because when he woke up, his phone was next to him and he saw that it was, 9 to 10. Detective Settle then explains to him how science plays a huge part in cases like this, and since, he made contact with Grace, he asked him, how would you feel giving me a DNA sample, a voluntary DNA sample? Jesse didn't hesitate. He agrees and says that he's happy to do it because he knows he hasn't done anything wrong. After this, Detective Settle, steps out of the room, and that's when Jesse's demeanor starts to shift. He fidgets a little, he opens a piece of gum or like candy, and then glances up at the camera as if he suddenly realizes, oh my gosh, they're recording this. Then he gets up and he knocks on the door and goes, "Hey, I just wanted to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?" And Detective Settle just, responds calmly saying, "You haven't been arrested." Jesse sighs and says, "Oh, okay, sorry." Visibly nervous yet relieved at this point. Detective Settle then tells him that this could possibly be a homicide investigation, to which Jesse just like gasps and utters, "Homicide?" Then he just goes quiet and sits back down. For a while, he just sits there thinking, adjusting himself, and occasionally glancing up at the camera. When Detective Settle comes back in, he says that they're going to hold off on the DNA sample for now, and Jesse agrees. He then asks Jesse if he has any tattoos, to which he says yep, and holds up his right forearm, which has tattoos all over it. Then Detective Settle pulls out a photo and asks, do you recognize the person in this picture? Which is a photo of Jesse from that same morning of him rolling a suitcase into the elevator of his building at 8:14 in the morning. Now, if you remember, Jesse told the police that he was barely waking up at 9 or 10 in the morning, but yet there's footage of him in the elevator with the suitcase at 8 in the morning. So Detective Settle is like, okay, can you explain to me this? Like, how are you saying you woke up at 9, but yet there's footage of you moving at 8? So Jesse looks at this and he nods and he's like, yeah, that's me in that picture. But then he still insists that he thought he woke up at 10 in the morning. He is sticking to that timeline even as Detective Settle just like stares at him with his hands on his chin in total silence. Jesse looks back and says like, "Is there something you want to ask me?" And that's when Detective Settle replies saying, "You were pretty specific about waking up after drinking, but here you are on camera walking with that suitcase at 8 in the morning." Jesse then says that maybe he got the timeline wrong and says, completely unprompted, that if it's the bag they're suspicious about, he still has it in his room and they can go look at it. But Detective Settle pushes back. He tells Jesse that he hasn't told the truth about how drunk he really was that night. They go back and forth for a bit about the time that he woke up and what he was doing with that suitcase, until Jesse says that he got it because he was going to move stuff out of his room. The detective is like, okay, let's put the bag to a side for a second. Where had you been that night? Jesse's like, I told you where I was that night, but Detective Settle says, no, that's not the case, all right? You've told a lie. So he's really pushing back because at this point, detectives know the truth. They looked at the CCTV footage from Sky City, from the City Life Hotel, and from surrounding businesses, and they knew that Jesse and Grace didn't go their separate ways after they had drinks at Andy's Burger Bar, like he said. They were literally seen walking off together, and investigators then saw them walking into the City Life Hotel up to the apartment floor where Jesse lived together via the elevator. So, of course, Jesse's sitting here lying to them, being like, no, we separated, we said goodbye, and that was it. When police, already know the truth. They had the footage of them literally going into his apartment together. So now that they saw that Jesse was lying, they were just asking themselves, like, what is Jesse hiding, and why is he lying about the time that he woke up, and why is he lying about going home with Grace? While still in the interview room, investigators requested a search warrant for his room at the City Life Hotel to search it for any evidence, since this was the last place Grace was seen entering. Once they got the warrant, detectives moved Jesse to a hostel so that he could stay there while they searched his place. Forensics went in with luminol, which is a chemical that lights up when it comes into contact with blood, and Sure enough, despite Jesse's attempt to clean up, they found large amounts of blood on the floor by the bed. This is the moment that Detective Settle knew that something terrible and just horrifying had happened. He then showed up at the hostel where they put Jesse and told him that there had been a development and that he needed to come back to the police station for more questioning. This time, Jesse went with his lawyer, Ian Brookie. Now, Jesse knew he had to start talking. Like at this point, I think he knew police are onto me. So that's when he finally admitted that his night with Grace didn't end at Sky City like he claimed before. He revealed that instead, they went to a few other bars and ended the night back in his apartment at City Life. He still claims that he was under the influence of alcohol, but that he remembered being in the room with Grace and that they were talking and kissing. He said she asked him to turn the TV off, and at some point, the conversation turned to the movie 50 Shades of Grey. According to him, Grace mentioned that there were certain things she liked based on the movie, and that's when they started having sex. At first, he said it was normal. Then, she supposedly brought up the idea of trying bondage. Jesse said that he paused, asked her if she was sure, and that Grace responded with, "We're in the moment, let's just go with it." From there, he said things escalated. It turned rough. He said that they ended up on the floor, and he claimed that Grace asked him to hold her arms tighter and to also hold her by the throat. He said that after they finished, he got up to take a shower because he was sweating, and that he actually fell asleep in the shower. He said that when he woke up, he wasn't sure what time it was, he just knew that it was dark, and he honestly had just assumed that Grace had left, so he crawled back into bed and went to sleep. The next morning, he said he woke up to find Grace lying on the floor with blood coming from her nose. He claimed that he screamed, he yelled, he shouted her name, and he tried to wake her up. And this is when Jesse suddenly stopped during the interview. He told Detective Settle that he needed a break because this was all just too much, so they stepped outside for him to get some fresh air. When he came back, Jesse continued telling them what happened. He said that after he saw Grace, he was in shock, that he just couldn't believe that she was gone, and that he was scared and didn't know what to do. So he went out, he bought a suitcase, but when he went back to the hotel, he said that he just stood there, that he kind of froze and didn't know what to do next. He put the suitcase on the bed and just kind of looked at it frozen. He said he couldn't even bring himself to put her inside the suitcase because it just didn't feel real. All he could think about was the night that they had shared and how they got here. At this point in the interview, he started crying. Through tears, he said that he eventually did what I think investigators feared. He admitted that he put Grace into the suitcase and that the entire time he said he kept saying, I'm sorry, over and over again. When asked if he caused any injuries to Grace that resulted in her death, Jesse said no. When asked up front if he killed Grace, he also said no. Now, with all of this evidence and his admission of disposing of the body, Jesse was officially arrested for Grace's murder, but they still didn't know where Grace was. Eventually, he did tell police that he left her body at a location called Waitakere Ranges, which is this remote forested area about 19 kilometers west of Auckland. So the following day, on December 9th, detectives found and exhumed her body, which was buried in a shallow grave just off Scenic Drive. She was found folded inside the suitcase, the same suitcase that Jesse was seen with. It was an absolutely devastating discovery, and it was horrifying for everyone involved. In the autopsy, it was revealed that Grace's cause of death was prolonged pressure on the neck and that she had multiple bruises on her body. The ones on her inner upper arms and left shoulder were suggestive of some degree of restraint, and the pressure applied to Grace's neck was so violent, making blood vessels burst throughout her face and her left eye, causing her nose to also bleed. Jesse had to apply significant pressure on her neck to cause this, so it didn't look like this was an accident as Jesse was claiming. On December 10th, he appeared in the Auckland District Court and was formally charged with Grace's murder. The news of Grace's death was everywhere, and while New Zealand law, granted him privacy for a fair trial, his identity did begin circulating online and through international media. At this point, public pressure for answers was growing, and people around the world were closely watching. Behind the scenes, police and Crown prosecutors were building a meticulous case against Jesse to get justice for Grace and for her family. Detective Scott Beard held a press conference after Grace was discovered, and his voice was actually shaking as he announced the tragic news that the search for her it was over, saying, quote, "This is an unbearable time for the Millane family, and our hearts go out to them." He emphasized that now they were going to put all the pieces together to figure out exactly what happened. The community's heartbreak was just palpable. I mean, Grace wasn't just a name in the media. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a loved one. She had come to New Zealand to explore, to meet people, to live, not to die there at the hands of one of its people. So the community was just taking this very personally. I mean, they were devastated to hear that this happened in their own community. Her family, of course, was just in shock and completely heartbroken after finding out what happened to their daughter, to their sister, to their loved one. Grace's father, David, who arrived in New Zealand on Friday, December 7th, also gave a statement. Now, her mother, Jillian, couldn't join because she was actually recovering from a breast cancer operation, which is just so sad. However, David's brother, Martin, was able to be with him as he arrived the following day. They were immediately treated with such kindness. David praised the Auckland police for how thorough and tireless their investigation was in his daughter's case. At times, more than 24 officers were working non-stop to find answers. He also thanked the media for being respectful during such a horrifying and devastating time, and said that the family was just deeply grateful to everyone involved. He made special mention of Detective Scott Beard, calling him the calm, human face of the police force, and praised Detective Senior Sergeant Greg Brand as the engine behind the investigation. Despite the horror of what happened, he said that he hopes that this doesn't stop anyone else from going out and exploring the world and living their life just like Grace did. Finally, he thanked the people of New Zealand for embracing Grace with just so much love and just so much compassion. She may have only spent a few weeks there, but in his words, he said, "You've taken her to your hearts, and in some small way, she will forever be a Kiwi." It was just a very touching and just beautiful message. The Prime Minister also personally apologized to Grace's family, saying, "Your daughter should have been safe here, and she wasn't. I'm sorry." So many people just came together to honor Grace's life and just speak out against violence towards women. She was barely 6 weeks into her gap year. It was supposed to be a few months of fun and new adventures, but a selfish man ended everything. On December 18th, 2018, candlelight vigils filled with hundreds of people were held across New Zealand, throughout Auckland, through Wellington, Queenstown, and other locations to honor Grace's life. The hashtag #HerLightOurLove filled social media, and strangers stood together in silence, grief, and solidarity. Grace's family flew her body home, and her funeral was held at the Brentwood Cathedral in Essex, England on January 10th, 2019, where hundreds of people gathered. Her brothers carried her coffin, and in their devastation, her family asked that donations in Grace's name go to the Little Princess Trust, a charity that provides wigs for children with cancer, and it's one charity that Grace had donated her hair to before setting off on her travels. They also recommended other charities that Grace held close to her heart, like White Ribbon UK, Mutts in Distress, and Smile Train. It's honestly just such an unimaginable loss, and the family was left to grieve their beautiful Grace, while investigators continued fighting for justice to ensure that the person that did this was held responsible and punished behind bars. Nearly a year after Grace's murder on November 4th, 2019, Jesse's murder trial began at the High Court in Auckland with a jury of 7 women and 5 men. He was pleading not guilty. The Crown's argument was simple and devastating. Jesse intentionally strangled Grace Millane to death, eroticized her murder, and then tried to cover it up, an elaborate web of lies. The defense, however, argued that Grace's death was a result of consensual rough gone wrong. They even brought in their own expert witness, pathologist Dr. Fintan Garavan, who actually agreed with the prosecution's expert, Dr. Simon Stables, on one major point, that Grace had been strangled to death. But Dr. Fintan argued that the strangulation could have accidentally occurred during their consensual sex. Now, his reasoning for this? Well, it's because he says that there was no classic defensive wounds on Grace's body. There were no scratches or abrasions that would suggest that she tried to fight him or tried to pull his hand off her neck. Jesse's defense also said that Grace was a huge fan of the movie 50 Shades of Grey, which is why she asked him to choke her during intercourse, but Jesse, having no experience doing such a thing, didn't know how to properly do it and accidentally went too far, and only acted in fear and panic afterwards. They also said that alcohol played a role that night. They referenced receipts gathered from the 3 bars Grace and Jesse visited that night and showed that they had a lot to drink, including multiple cocktails and tequila shots. So they were saying that alcohol could have impaired Grace's breathing more than usual when she allegedly asked Jesse to choke her. Again, they were just basing the defense on kind of placing the blame on Grace, who Jesse says wanted to be choked. However, the prosecution was like, no, 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 this is not happening. The prosecution quickly dismantled that narrative. Crown prosecutor Brian Dickey told the jury, you can't consent to your own murder. She would have had to consent to someone holding her neck for 5 to 10 minutes until she passed out. That's just silly. Their forensic pathologist, Dr. Simon Stable, said death from erotic asphyxiation is rare and that he's never seen it. This wasn't rough. It was murder. The prosecution was going to make that clear during the trial as they showed the jury what actually happened on Grace's last night alive, and that's exactly what they did. You know, they pulled all the CCTV footage together and they went through all the evidence from the very beginning. I know we briefly mentioned, you know, what police had seen on the CCTV footage, but the trial was just way more detailed, so let's go through what was revealed to the jury. As we already know, Grace and Jesse matched on Tinder, and after chatting a bit, they agreed to meet for drinks at Sky City on December 1st, 2018. That day at 5:37 p.m., CCTV footage shows Grace leaving her hostel and heading towards Federal Street. By 5:45 p.m., she's seen outside Sky City wearing this black dress and white sneakers. Meanwhile, Jesse is seen on CCTV finishing some drinks at the nearby bar, the Bluestone Room, which was about a 5-minute walk from Sky City. Once he finishes his drinks, he heads over for his date with Grace. He arrives, he meets Grace, he gives her a hug, and they walk inside the building to get a drink. They make their way up to the escalator and head to their first stop. They share drinks at Andy's Burger and Bar inside Sky City, and on the surface, the date seems casual and normal. They stand by the bar, they look at the menu, and they talk for a bit. At 7:12 p.m., they head to the Mexican cafe across the street where they continue talking and drinking. At 8:27 p.m., the pair leaves the cafe and heads to the Bluestone Room, the same bar that Jesse had a few beers at before meeting Grace, which again is around a 5-minute walk away. Everything was just so close to each other, you know, they kind of just hopped around in the same area. There, they kiss, they drink some tequila shots, and they seem to be enjoying each other's company. At one point, Jesse goes to the bathroom and Grace texts one of her friends telling her how the date is going. She told her friend that Jesse was the manager of an oil company, which again we know is a lie, and tells a friend that he lives in a hotel and basically says that they're just ordering cocktails and just celebrating her birthday and getting smashed to celebrate it. She also told her friend that she clicked really well with Jesse, so it seemed like she was enjoying her date. After this, they continue to just talk a bit, they hang out, but then something odd happens. When Grace steps away to go to the bathroom, she leaves her purse at the table, and Jesse just picks up her purse and starts going through it, which is such a red flag. Like, why are you going through her purse and what were you looking for? Was he checking to see if she had some sort of self-defense tool, maybe a pocket knife, maybe a pepper spray, or maybe was looking for the keys to her hostel room? I mean, who knows what he was doing going through her bag? Then at 9:29 p.m., Jesse comments on her Facebook photo calling her beautiful and very radiant. Then by 9:40 p.m., they're seen entering the City Life Hotel together, where again Jesse was living. Now the hotel is right next to the Bluestone Room, so again it's just another super short walk away. They take the elevator up to the 3rd floor and they head to room 308. That is the last time that Grace is seen alive. From that point forward, everything we know comes from Jesse's statements, from forensic evidence, from CCTV footage, and from police investigations. What happened inside room 308, only Jesse and Grace know. And unfortunately, Grace will never be able to tell her side of it. As he said in his early interviews with detectives, Jesse claimed that they were having, you know, consensual rough that involved choking. He said Grace brought up the topic of bondage, told him to choke her, and that it was all part of a game. He claimed again that afterward he took a shower where he fell asleep, then he woke up later that night, went to go to bed, and thought that Grace had left on her own, but when he woke up later that morning, he saw her on the floor with blood coming out of her nose. However, this is where the evidence tells a completely different story. He actually wasn't asleep. More CCTV evidence investigators found showed much more. At 1:29 a.m. on December 2nd, while again he claimed he was sleeping and while Grace lay lifeless in his room, Jesse was searching Google Maps for the Waitakere Ranges, and then 2 minutes later he Googled hottest fire as he was figuring out how to dispose of her body. After that, he browsed for corn sites. The title of the first search was extremely explicit and just sick. The next 3 searches on that site were related to teenagers and slaves. Then between 1:45 and 1:49 a.m., he took 7 graphic photos of Grace's unclothed body, which included close-ups of her and some of her body being manipulated to get certain angles that he wanted. Hours later at 6 o'clock in the morning, he Googled rigor mortis, car hire Auckland, extra large bags, and carpet cleaner. Those searches made one thing abundantly clear to the prosecution. This was not panic, this was planning. He didn't call emergency services, he didn't try to help her. Instead, he planned on how to hide what he did. Later that morning at around 7:51 a.m., he messaged a woman he matched with on Tinder to confirm their date in the afternoon. Yeah, a date. Like what? Like he has Grace's lifeless body at his feet and he's arranging his afternoon cocktail plans? It's insane. After that, at 8 o'clock in the morning, he gets on the elevator and makes his way out of the hotel. He walks to the warehouse, which is a store in the Atrium Shopping Center, where he buys a large gray suitcase. CCTV shows him returning to city life with the suitcase at 8:14 in the morning, which again, just to clarify, he told investigators that he wasn't even awake at this point because he didn't wake up until 9:10 in the morning. Yet look at everything that he's done before 8 a.m. He later told police that it was at this time, once he was back at the hotel with the suitcase, that he tried to overdose on medication and end his own life, saying that he bought pills at the warehouse but just couldn't go through with it. However, in reality, the receipt from the warehouse shows that the only thing that he bought was the suitcase. He didn't actually buy any pills, so that was just another lie. Jesse said that when he left, Grace was half in, half out of the suitcase at that stage, and then at 8:35 in the morning, he leaves the hotel again and buys cleaning supplies from Countdown Metro, which is like this local supermarket. He purchases Genola Power Clean, a twin pack of gloves, and a pack of gum, all with cash. At 8:40 a.m., he returns to his hotel, and at 10:33 a.m., he takes a taxi to Apex Car Rental Shop, where he rents a 2016 red Toyota Corolla hatchback for 24 hours. He then returns to his hotel and makes more Google searches, which include flesh-eating birds and are there vultures in New Zealand. At 2:53 p.m., Jesse leaves the hotel once again and makes his way to his Tinder date, the one that he confirmed earlier that morning. This whole time, Grace was lifeless in his blood-soaked room and he is going on a date. It's just insane. I cannot believe how heartless and inhumane this guy is. Now, during this date, the woman described the entire thing as just being completely bizarre. At one point, he told her that all of his friends were police officers, and then he began talking about bodies in the Waitakere Ranges, saying that police dogs couldn't even pick up the scent of a body if it was buried deeper than 5 feet. Why are you talking about that on a date? He also told her that he spent the morning shopping for a very large duffel bag to keep his softball gear in, supposedly because he taught young children the sport and needed a bigger bag. In the end, he said that he got one, so that was his, win of the day. He also talked about how snakes can kill you in Australia, but then things got darker. He brought up this disturbing story about a guy he claimed to know, someone who accidentally killed a woman during rough by strangling her. Now, this date later testified that it was chilling in hindsight. It was as if he was trying to either relive what he just did to Grace or kind of like rehearse his lie to kind of see how believable it sounded. She said that throughout the whole date, Jesse was fidgety and didn't seem to treat the outing as a date, but rather as a way for him to talk about his own thoughts and his own stories. When the date was pretty much over, she realized that their cars were parked in the same direction, but being creeped out by him, she lied and said that her car was parked somewhere else and walked off in the opposite direction. She said something about him just made her feel unsafe and just uneasy. So when he later texted her asking for a second date, she declined. It must be so frightening for that woman to now realize that she was on a date with a man who had just brutally killed another date the night before. After that date ended at 5:25 p.m., Jesse leaves the bar and heads to a pharmacy where he tells the pharmacist that he has an allergy on his hands that is causing a lot of itching and asks for the strongest medication to stop it. Later, this pharmacist said that it could have been a result of all the cleaning products that he was using to try to clean up Grace's blood. After the pharmacy, he then returns to his hotel room and leaves again at around 7:12 p.m. At 7:30 p.m., he is seen parking the rental car at Countdown Metro's parking lot, which is the supermarket that he went to earlier. Inside the supermarket, he examines like this carpet cleaner stand as if he's contemplating renting it. 15 minutes later, he returns to his hotel but heads out once again at 7:51 p.m., making making his way back to the supermarket. He arrives at 8:11 p.m., which is when he rents the rug doctor machine and tells the store that he was trying to remove a wine stain. He takes it back to his room along with more cleaning supplies. He tries to scrub the crime scene more and then returns the machine around an hour later. He then returns to the hotel where he grabs a luggage trolley before heading back up to his room. At 9:30 p.m., he is seen entering the elevator with the luggage trolley, which now has 2 suitcases and a duffel bag loaded onto it. One of the suitcases held Grace's body. Seeing this video is just honestly heartbreaking, knowing that someone's daughter was just inside there, and this guy is just acting like it's nothing. He then places the bag into his rental car and drives to a Wilson parking garage where he leaves the car parked overnight. The following morning, now December 3rd, he gets up early and gets into his rental car at 6:14 in the morning and begins driving to the location he Google searched the night before, Waitakere Ranges. But before he goes there, he stops at a hardware store at 6:50 in the morning, buys a orange/red shovel and 4 bolts, and then drives to Scenic Drive. There, he buries Grace in a shallow grave and loosely covers it with fern branches. He just left Grace there in the middle of nowhere as if she meant nothing. And then he just planned to go back to live his life as if nothing had happened. Like, what was his thought process throughout all of this? At around 9:30 in the morning, Jesse is seen walking back into his hotel without shoes and carrying a black duffel bag and a water bottle. He's actually walking barefoot because his shoes got dirty when he buried Grace. Then at 9:52 in the morning, he is seen entering the elevator, this time carrying a large black trash bag and a small black tote bag. After this, he heads out to Mint Dry Cleaners to drop off some clothes, was in the black tote bag that he was seen with earlier. Then he drives back to the warehouse and buys a second suitcase, one identical to the one that he buried Grace in. At around 10:24 in the morning, he goes to a self-service car wash across the street and cleans out his rental car. He cleans his shoes and leaves the shovel he used to dig Grace's grave leaning up against the wall. After this, he returns to City Life with 2 luggages, the one he bought identical to the one he buried Grace in, and the other one he wheeled out along with it the day before, which was in his car. At around 3:15 p.m., he goes to drop off more dry cleaning and picks up the black tote bag that he left earlier at the same time. So yeah, that is pretty much everything that Jesse did on Tuesday, December 4th. Now, the following day on Wednesday, December 5th, which is the day that Grace was reported missing, at around 4:51, he is seen throwing various things from his duffel bag into a garbage bin at Albert Park. Now, the things that he threw away have never been found, but he claims that it was everything, that he threw away Grace's clothes, her phones, all of her belongings. Now, I know this was a lot. It was a lot of timestamps and it was a lot of locations and a lot of movement, but this is essentially the full timeline of what happened the day of Grace's murder and the days after. It's just horrifying what Jesse did. Everything that he did to cover this up is just truly a nightmare, and he had no regard for Grace's humanity and for her life. Honestly, the prosecution and the detectives did such a good job of putting all of these pieces together and just laying this out for the jury to truly see what Jesse did and how much work he put into covering up his crime. Again, Jesse didn't appear panicked and frightened like his defense was claiming. He appeared focused, meticulous, and calculated. Apart from everything he did to cover his tracks, the Crown made it clear to the jury this wasn't just a case about one woman's death. This was about a pattern of disturbing behavior. According to prosecutors, Jesse used Tinder as a tool to seek out young women, not for connection, but for control. 3 women actually came forward to share their encounters or experiences with Jesse during the trial. One of them, a waitress, told the court that she met him at his City Life hotel apartment for what was supposed to be their first and only date, just 2 weeks before Grace was killed. In their messages, they had discussed rough sex, and this included choking, something that she admitted was a personal preference. At Jesse's apartment, they had they shared a pizza, and then Jesse fell asleep. She left quietly, but she accidentally left her glasses behind, and he didn't return them until 2 weeks later at the bar where she worked. By that time, Grace had already been killed, again showing no sense of panic or fear like his defense argued. Another woman who testified had never met Jesse in person, but they exchanged explicit photos and talked on the phone. She said that their conversations quickly escalated to and control. Jesse told her that he was into feet, domination, and strangulation. Even after Grace's death, Jesse kept messaging her, still pushing for a date. Now, she said that she never agreed to meet him in person because she just didn't feel safe. The things that he wanted to make her do just made her feel uncomfortable. This situation again just showed that Jesse wasn't scared or acting out of panic. He was ready to go on another date after killing Grace. So he knew what he was doing. The third woman's testimony was just much more intense. The two were supposed to go out for drinks, but Jesse convinced her to just skip the bar and just head straight to his apartment with alcohol. She said he spent over 3 hours talking about gang fights, about knowing famous athletes, and about being chased by dangerous people. Then he suddenly shifted, telling her that he loved her and wanted to be with her even though they had just met. He kissed her and then pulled her onto the bed. Now, she told him very clearly that she did not want to have sex. But then she says that Jesse got on top of her, pinned her down, pinned her arms down, and then pressed his body against her face. She couldn't breathe. She fought back, kicking as hard as she could, but he didn't stop. It was only when she managed to turn her head and get a breath of fresh air and pretend to pass out to get Jesse to snap out of whatever he was thinking and get off of her. But even then, Jesse stayed on top of her for a while before finally getting off. When she gasped for air, Jesse looked at her and said, "Oh, you don't think that I did that on purpose, do you?" She said that she was genuinely in shock, like she honestly believed that she was going to die that night. He then went into the bathroom and started grabbing his stomach as if he were in pain, telling her that he had cancer. So Jesse's actions on this date just show how selfish he was and how he only wanted to do whatever he wanted, even if the woman wasn't okay with it. Now, Jesse's defense questioned her and were like, "Okay, if you were so scared of Jesse after that interaction, why did you keep messaging him afterward?" Now, she was like, "Okay, yeah, I was uncomfortable with him and I wanted him out of my life, but I was scared of what would happen if I cut him off completely, so I just continued going along with him." She's like, "Yeah, some messages make it seem like I'm playing along, but I was doing it because I was terrified." She said, quote, "A person who can almost kill someone by suffocating and then faking cancer to get sympathy, there's a word for that. It's a sociopath." So yeah, these three women gave more insight into who Jesse really was. It wasn't just one night gone wrong like the defense was arguing in Grace's case. These weren't isolated events, and Grace's case wasn't just him making a mistake or acting out of fear or panic. This was a man who again and again pushed boundaries, ignored consent, and always wanted to be in control. After seeing all of this evidence and just hearing from numerous people, on November 22nd, 2019, the jury found Jesse guilty. They didn't believe, the story that he was selling, that Grace died accidentally during consensual involving choking. They heard from expert witnesses who explained that it would have taken at least 5 to 10 minutes of sustained pressure to kill someone that way. Grace had deep bruises on her neck and on her arms, consistent with being forcibly restrained. She would have gone limp before dying, but Jesse kept going. In February of 2020, Jesse was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. The judges described the murder as callous, as depraved, and as brutal. He acknowledged Grace's particular vulnerability. She was alone in a foreign country, trusting a complete stranger. Jesse, a large man, strangled her in the most intimate and the most terrifying way possible. The court also got to hear from Grace's parents, from her siblings, from her extended family, and from her friends. There were 26 victim impact statements in total. David and Jillian Millane's words were just absolutely devastating. Grace was their sunshine. She was the light of their life. She was kind, funny, and adventurous. Her death tore a hole through their family that would never heal. The judge also pointed out that Jesse had a pattern of lying, but not just about what happened to Grace. He lied about his identity. He told fake stories to women to gain their trust and presented himself as something that he wasn't. He also objectified Grace. He even sexualized her after her death. He acted with a level of cruelty and planning that just went far beyond poor judgment or panic. This was clear murder, and this was just evil. And Jesse honestly couldn't even say that it was an accident. In fact, a law in England and in Wales now clearly states that no one can legally consent to serious harm or death for the purpose of sexual gratification. This was a response to growing concerns over the so-called, rough gone wrong defense, which had been used by some defendants accused of killing or seriously injuring women to claim that the violence was consensual. Campaigners such as "We Can't Consent to This" said that dozens of women had been killed in such cases, and in several trials, the defense actually worked to reduce charges or sentencing using the rough gone wrong method. So to close this legal loophole, Parliament amended the Domestic Abuse Bill, making it crystal clear in statute that consent is not a valid defense when the harm causes bodily harm or worse. This draws a hard line, making sure people like Jesse couldn't hide behind excuses. So thankfully, yeah, Jesse was found guilty and was sentenced to life. He won't be able to harm another woman again. Now, Jesse's time in court didn't actually end here. Not long after being sentenced for Grace's murder, he was actually back in court, this time for R-wording another British tourist just 8 months before he met Grace. In this case, he brought her to his motel room under false pretenses, saying that they were going to be going to a liquor store, not to his motel. And when she refused to have with him, he R-worded her. She told the court, quote, "He started to get mad at me. He asked me what my problem was, why I was denying myself to him after he had treated me like a princess. His voice was getting louder and his eyes were getting bigger. He was getting really mad at me. I asked him to be quieter, to not shout so loud at me." Now, she says that she was so scared of leaving, she didn't know exactly where she was. It was late at night and she had lost her wallet and her keys, so she ended up just staying at the motel. She said that she got into bed fully clothed, saying, quote, "I tried to stay as far on one side of the bed as possible, but he put his arm around me and pulled me into him. He started to touch my bum with his hands and started pulling me more into him and touching me, and I had already said that I didn't want to do this stuff, and I was just really upset about not being able to go home. He started touching me more and kissing me more. I was scared that if I pushed him off, he would get angry and start shouting again. I'm pretty sure that he got on top of me, then he started having me. I was just frozen and I let him do what he needed to do so I could try and go to sleep or go home as soon as possible." Now, she tried to forget this traumatic experience until she saw Jesse's face in the news. That's when she came forward to the police and revealed what had happened. It's just so horrifying and terrible for this woman to have gone through this experience, and it broke my heart reading that, and it just again made me so angry. Like, this guy is disgusting and just truly evil. Now, Jesse wasn't in court again just for this incident. A former girlfriend from 2017 also came forward. She said that Jesse was, in a way, a person with two very different sides to their personality, one good and one evil, that he subjected her to months of physical, sexual, emotional, and just financial abuse. He slapped her across the face during arguments, he held knives to her throat, he forced her to do horrible sexual acts, and claimed that he had been sent by the CIA to kill her. She lived in constant fear, saying, quote, "The first time he hit me, we were having an argument and he just slapped me across the face. I can't escape. I've just put a lease down on this place, moved in. How am I supposed to get away?" Jesse manipulated her financially, emotionally, and psychologically. When he wasn't gaslighting or threatening her, he was borrowing money from her that he never paid her back, and again pretended to be this high-class businessman, just like he did with Grace. She eventually secured a legal protection order against him, and in the end, he was convicted for these two incidents in 2 additional trials, one for the R-wording of the British tourist and one for the abuse of his ex-girlfriend. At his sentencing, the judge told Jesse, quote, "Your mother rejected you. That may go some way towards explaining your attitude towards women." In the end, he received a sentence of 7.5 years as well as one of 3.5 years to be served concurrently with his life sentence for what he did to Grace. Jesse got quite angry when he heard his sentences. He even shouted at the judge saying, quote, "You have no reason to convict me. You're full of mate," and he ended up appealing all of his sentences. Thankfully, all of them were denied, and thankfully, he is not free to hurt anyone ever again. Grace should still be here. She should have spent her gap year exploring the world, meeting new people, and just sharing every moment with her family who just loved her so deeply. She was full of light. She was hardworking and excited to see the world. In the wake of her murder, her mother Jillian and her cousin Hannah refused to let Grace's story end in tragedy. They turned their grief into action. They created a charity in Grace's name called Grace Loves X, which helps women affected by domestic violence. They collect handbags and fill them with essential toiletries and then donate them to women's shelters. They have also raised significant funds for white ribbon charities in both the UK and New Zealand, continuing to fight for women who are at the risk of gender-based violence. Their incredible efforts haven't gone unnoticed. Both were honored with OBEs, which is an honor given to those who've made a real lasting difference in society in the UK. And they absolutely have. But Jillian's tribute to her daughter Grace didn't stop there. In a very courageous and emotional act of love, she climbed to Mount Everest base camp in her daughter's honor. After 8 days of climbing through freezing temperatures, she reached the base camp and she actually left a stone engraved with Grace's name on it. Alongside excited, she placed another for her husband David, Grace's father, who heartbreakingly passed away from cancer in late 2020. Just, oh my gosh, just the pain that the Millane family has endured is unimaginable. They lost their daughter to a horrific act of violence, and then they lost a devoted father and husband to a horrible disease. It's just so heartbreaking and it's just so unfair. Detective Scott Beard, who led Grace's investigation, has remained in contact with the Millane family and has supported them during these terribly tragic times. He too was actually diagnosed with cancer and has been battling it since 2020 while also standing by Grace's family. On what would have been her 27th birthday, December 2023, Scott joined Hannah, a family friend, to celebrate her life. They ran in support of Shine, which is a domestic violence charity, and were joined by other friends and members of Hannah's running group. Hannah met Grace on the hockey team at the University of Lincoln and just described her as just being so warm, so bubbly, and the type of person who made everyone feel welcomed. At the time, she was living in New Zealand temporarily, so she knew that she'd be there for the 5th anniversary, and she just knew that she had to do something in honor of Grace. The day before the run, she laid flowers at the spot where Grace's body was found, accompanied by Detective Scott Beard and Tony Jordan, the liaison officer for the Millane family during the trial. It was just a very emotional moment, and the run the next day was something Hannah knew Grace would have found hilarious since running really wasn't her thing. But it never really was about the run, you know, it was about opening up space to talk about domestic violence and about keeping Grace's story alive as more than just a headline. As Hannah said, if even one person hears that message and carries it forward, it's just worth everything. Through it all, Grace's friends and family have taken the darkest chapter of their lives and they have turned it into something meaningful, something that helps others. Instead of being consumed by anger or bitterness, they chose to honor Grace by creating a legacy of compassion, of protection, and of hope. I hope that wherever they are, you know, Grace and her father David have found their way back to each other, that they're together now in peace, and that side by side they're watching over their family, guiding them and protecting them and staying close always. We've covered so many cases similar to Grace's on this channel, and it's always just so frustrating to hear another woman's life taken so senselessly. It's something that can happen anywhere to anyone, and often at the hands of someone that they thought they could trust. We need to keep sharing these stories and having these conversations and just fighting for a world where women are safe. I've linked some resources down below for you guys to check out after this video. Let's just make sure to look out for each other and just, again, help make this world a safer place. What happened to Grace is so heartbreaking and unfair. What Jesse did is just absolutely evil. It's just horrifying to think about how many more women he could have done this to in the future if he hadn't been stopped. And the way that the detectives worked so hard to catch him is just unbelievable. And it's just amazing that they were able to piece all of this together just through CCTV footage. I would love to know what you guys thought about this down below. And if you guys haven't watched my last video, I talk about what happened to Ana Maria, a young girl whose life was taken by someone she trusted. You guys can click the upcoming screen to watch her case along with another past video. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this down below. This was such a difficult case to get through, but I appreciate you guys so much. And yeah, thank you for being here and for listening to what happened to Grace. If you guys are not subscribed to my second channel, and if you guys are looking to listen to something fictional and just listen to like a good mystery or thriller, make sure to check it out, because that is my channel where I post non-true crime content. I discuss thriller and horror movies, and I just posted a video talking about the thriller movie Drop. So if you want, you know, something fictional, head over to my second channel. But yeah, thank you guys again so much for being here, and I will see you all in the next one. Stay safe, familia.